Metroid is cursed, and has been since its first game 35 years ago. Cursed to never sell to a comparable level of its slightly older siblings, The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario. Hello there, Commonwealth Ram here, with my good friend Joseph Ferris of Gamexplain, as it is time to talk about the last two opportunities for the Metroid franchise, Dread and Prime 4.
You see, Nintendo's oldest still-running space adventure, despite being praised for its quality, has never had a title that sold 3 million copies or more. This no 3 million curse has now lasted for 35 years. Beginning from the NES with the original, Game Boy with Metroid 2, SNES with Super Metroid, GameCube with Primes 1 and 2, Game Boy Advance with Fusion and Zero Mission, DS with Hunters and Prime Pinball, Wii with Prime 3 and Other M, all the way to the 3DS with Samus Returns. Through over 35 years, not a single Metroid game has managed to sell more than the first Metroid Prime with its 2.8 million copies. Though what is far worse is that Metroid has never struggled as much as it has in the 2010s. Not a single game in the franchise surpassed 1.5 million copies sold from 2010 to the end of 2019. Terrible, or more precisely, dangerous numbers for a franchise with such a legendary video game protagonist, the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter, Samus Aran. Sorry, Boba Fett. Even so, it is the only big franchise from Nintendo that never gained mass appeal, and with low sales numbers, the question looms. If Metroid Dread and Prime 4 don't do well enough, will Nintendo just conclude the saga of Samus Aran with the latest mission in the Prime and 2D timelines in the 2020s?
We believe this to be the case, so here's an in-depth explanation of how important it is that we all go out and buy both Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime 4 whenever that comes out, since this is all about saving both 2D and 3D Metroid from ending this decade. The premise is really simple. The Nintendo Switch is the system where Nintendo is capable of breaking any sales records for nearly all of their franchises. Best-selling Splatoon, check. Mario Party, check. Xenoblade Chronicles, check. 3D Mario, check. Zelda, check. Super Smash Bros, check. Animal Crossing, check. And Mario Kart, also check by the end of this year. And no wonder, since the Nintendo Switch is likely to surpass 100 million systems sold worldwide by the end of this holiday season, breaking the previous console record held by the Nintendo Wii. Needless to say, there's never been a bigger market for Metroid out there, and Nintendo knows it, so much so that they have dedicated the time frame between June until October to promote Metroid Dread as hard as they possibly can.
We saw this during E3, with the reveal, or more specifically, the revival of Dread. The first brand new Metroid game in over a decade, and the first new 2D Metroid game in 19 years. Then followed up with the heavy promo effort during the Treehouse and through Nintendo's Twitter accounts. And then they showed the greatest proof of the big Metroid trial in July, with the reveal of the Nintendo Switch OLED model on July 6th, with trademark white Joy-Cons matching the first game shown in the announcement trailer, Metroid Dread, or more specifically, the Emmy Galactic Federation robots found in this title. And if you thought that was a coincidence, then think again, as the Nintendo Switch OLED model is not launching with any Zelda title like the Switch did in 2017 and Switch Lite in 2019, but on October 8th with Metroid Dread. The message is clear. Buy the OLED model and the flagship title for the system in 2021, Metroid Dread, our newest installment of the Metroid series, which we will be celebrating and promoting throughout its 35th anniversary on August 20th. And from there on through September to the release of the latest Metroid game in Samus Aran's life and timeline. A game that could end series producer Yoshio Sakamoto's side-scroller Metroid timeline if the game doesn't sell well on the record-breaking Nintendo Switch.
In other words, Metroid Dread is Nintendo Switch's equivalent to Nintendo 3DS Fire Emblem situation, when a long-running franchise gets one final chance to sell and save itself or end. In the case of Fire Emblem, we were talking about an over 20-year-old franchise getting one last chance to sell. Awakening was prepared to be the swan song, or if you prefer, end to the franchise, but instead it ended up as a masterpiece with a 92 on Metacritic, but more importantly, worldwide sales to match. 2.31 million copies on the still not too popular Nintendo 3DS from 2012 to 2017. This number may not sound impressive, as even Metroid has managed to sell more in the past with some of their games, but to put this success into perspective, 2.31 million copies was more than double the sales of the most Fire Emblem title to that point, the Blazing Blade. As you can see, the sales situation for Fire Emblem was far worse than that of Metroid's, and Awakening single-handedly revived and saved its franchise. Now Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime 4 has to do the same for Metroid on the Nintendo Switch in the next few years. So what is the likely magical sales number that needs to be surpassed by one of these two new Metroid titles? Most likely 3 million copies for Metroid Prime 4 and 2+ million for Metroid Dread.
But the more you think about it, 3 million for each might be an ultimatum set by Nintendo for giving Samus Aran new missions on Nintendo systems after the Nintendo Switch from 2026 and onward. Since those are the sales numbers of the last two Fire Emblem games, Fates and Three Houses on the 3DS and Switch, with Three Houses being the best-selling Fire Emblem title of all time. But back to Metroid, which needs to get out of the sales mud. Since if the sales of new Metroid games don't improve, then these 35th anniversary celebrations might be the last big anniversary for Metroid where we can look forward to new games without any shadow of doubt. In other words, Metroid's continued presence on new Nintendo systems after the Switch is on the line, and it is up to us in Australia, Europe, and America to secure this franchise's future. But why these specific countries? Well, Metroid simply doesn't sell in Japan, which puts even more at stake as the Japanese market, dominated by handhelds, has been Nintendo's #1 priority the last decade. If Metroid fails this time, Nintendo's corporate leadership in Kyoto will just think that this franchise is not worth the effort as it will never sell in Japan, and even in the West if it is not bringing in the numbers to justify increased development costs. This goes in particular for Metroid Prime 4, which is shaping up to be one of Nintendo's greatest and most expensive video game projects of all time.
With a star-packed development team from across the video game industry's best studios, all making up a team that will bring Retro Studios out of its lengthy banana sleep since they released Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze in the beginning of 2014. Mercury Steam's budget for Metroid Dread is obviously much lower than Retro and Metroid Prime 4, but their talent following Samus' returns is undeniable. But even so, if we gamers and most of all Nintendo fans don't show up, meaning we don't buy this game and Metroid Prime 4 later down the line to show that we want to support this franchise, then Nintendo will definitely not continue pouring money into the franchise that doesn't make them money compared to nearly all of their other first-party franchises. The situation is serious, and to give you a little perspective of how serious it is, let's bring up The Legend of Zelda, which debuted 7 months prior to Metroid in 1986. Zelda has always been more popular than Metroid, but the difference hasn't been as drastic as in the last couple of years, as the latest installment in the Zelda series, Breath of the Wild, has sold over 5 million copies more on the Nintendo Switch alone than the entire Metroid franchise across 35 years on all systems. Though keep in mind that before Breath of the Wild, no Zelda game had surpassed 10 million copies sold on a single system, so perhaps Metroid and the Switch could achieve something similar by say selling 5 million copies of Dread and then say 5 million copies of Metroid Prime 4 in 2022 or 2023. Don't get me wrong, these sales numbers would not get any of these games into the 10 best-selling Switch games, as you need 10+ million copies sold to get them, but it would do something more important: save Metroid.
With that being said, Metroid Dread has for a while been a top seller on both Amazon and GameStop's online stores. Then again, that was required if Metroid was to have a future on Nintendo's systems after the Switch. For Nintendo, this is all a question of profitability, so nothing is more harmful for Metroid's chances than troublemakers who claim that $60 is too much for this game. No, absolutely not. $60 may be too much for Mario Golf Super Rush, but not for a brand new Metroid adventure, the first one in HD, and the first new Nintendo release running on an OLED display. $60 is just the price for new Nintendo games, and Metroid has, excluding Other M, a brilliant reputation when it comes to games where we play as Samus Aran. So this price is more than justified, as this is no indie game production. That's all that needs to be said. Buy Metroid Dread this year in 2021 and Metroid Prime 4 whenever it releases in 2022 or more likely 2023 to help these two games each sell more than 3 million copies on the Nintendo Switch. Also that we can save Metroid from ending too early in the 21st century and grant Samus new appearances outside Super Smash Bros. And likely future Mario Kart installments.
So be sure to leave a like on this video, share it to help save Metroid, press that subscribe button and notification bell. A big thanks goes to Joseph Ferris of Gamexplain for joining me in this video, as both of us are determined to help Metroid survive the first half of this decade. Finally, a big thanks goes to all patreon.com/commonrealm patrons, and in particular to royal producer Charles Shush. You rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.